Okay, I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone to Career Conversations, a University of Rochester webinar series developed to help you leverage your existing talents, pursue new ideas, and to navigate your personal and professional journey. My name is Michelle Cavalcanti and I work in alumni relations, identifying and developing professional development resources and programs. Today we have Paul Retoff from the class of 1967 with us, who is going to introduce the concept of purposeful leadership. Paul is a certified management consultant, strategic management professional, and president of Retoff Consulting. He also serves as president of the Foundation for Purposeful Organizations. Paul has been a business consultant in Southern California for more than 30 years, assisting a wide range of middle market companies plan and manage their growth and success. Paul has been a frequent contributor to the Business Makeover section of the Los Angeles Times and has published numerous articles on a variety of topics. He is also the author of Thriving in a New Stakeholder World, Purpose as the New Competitive Advantage. So whether you are early in your career or a seasoned professional, today you will learn about this type of leadership so that you can elevate the role of purpose in your organization. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul, and he will answer all questions at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to send the questions in by the Q&A box. And with that, welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much. And it's really great to be here. It's so exciting. I was getting ready this morning. I could just remember, I was just thinking back of the days in Rochester, and it was just those memories were just incredible. I hadn't thought about the U of R for a long time. And anyway, it's great to be here and to be a contribution to all of you. So the topic today is purpose, the new competitive advantage. And I say that, the new competitive advantage, as if it's a good thing. But as you'll see, it's not quite what you might have in mind, even though it's a subtitle of my book. And we'll get into that problem later. So it's a hot topic these days. Purpose is in every conversation. Most organizations that I know of have a purpose or a mission. I would say right now we have a purpose industry. There are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that are in the purpose business in supporting organizations around purpose. I did a Google search the other day on purpose in business, and I got 1.9 billion results. So this is a topic on everybody's mind. However, I think for most businesses, purpose lives as a strategy. And what I mean by that, it's an organization takes on a purpose in order to do something or to accomplish something, to have some kind of competitive advantage, whether it's for their customer, for their employees, for the environment they operate in, for the ultimate consumer. It's considered not something other than some kind of competitive advantage. So if it lives as a strategy, does it really have the power that purpose can bring to organizations? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So what I've been working on over, I would say, a fairly long time now, probably close to 20 years, is this idea of purpose and where it lives in organizations. And the work I've been doing, we call it purposeful leadership. So I want to give you a little background in terms of the journey that I took in getting to the position where I am today, and how this particular type of leadership has evolved. So back in 2001, I was in this course, and one of the books that we had to read was this philosophy book by Ken Wilber, Sex, Ecology, and Spirituality. It's a big, thick book, and first go around, I only got into it by 70 pages. 70 pages was as far as I could get. However, those first 70 pages really made a huge difference in my life. In reading through that, so first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the book. So the book really addresses evolution of life, and how it started, and how each level of complexity sort of builds on the previous one. And at some point, things get transformed into a higher level. So you get the idea, and what this book is really about is talking about what's next, like what's the next higher life form. So unfortunately, I didn't really get it right. If that's what you want to talk about, if you consider what Ken Wilber was thinking about in the next higher life form. But for me, being a businessman and being someone who really loves business and eats and breathes that for many, many years, I started thinking about like, what could be that next higher life form? And what came to me was organizations. So organizations, and he talks about this in the book, that it's not more of the same. I don't believe an organization is just more people. I think an organization is something different. When people get together and they start thinking about a problem, because that's the only reason why you would organize, is to solve some kind of problem in the world. When people get together and start thinking about that, something happens magical. It transforms into something much bigger. And as a result, we as a species has done amazing things and developed amazing technology. All of that couldn't have happened without organizing. So I see organizations as something very, very powerful. And I can see how organizations are getting larger, and not just in their physical size in the sense that they're employees, but like their impact with other organizations and how they kind of interact with and are integrated with many other different organizations, whether it be your supply chain, your customers, professionals. There are just so many interactions that you can just see how these organizations keep growing and becoming more complex and solving more difficult problems in our lives. So for me, it was all about organizations. I saw that as the next higher life form. And that was a big insight for me. Then I started thinking about, okay, well, if an organization is a life form, then it must operate in the same way as other life forms. And what's important for a life form? It's the environment they live in, they operate in. Organizations would not be successful. Think of any kind of organism would not survive if it weren't for an environment that is supportive in some way. And organizations are the same. So what is the environment or ecosystem for an organization? And during that time, I had been thinking about stakeholders. And we have employees are stakeholders, shareholders are stakeholders, many other people that have a stake in what happens with an organization. So I started thinking, okay, well, maybe it's stakeholders represent that environment. And if I can define stakeholder as any individual or group of individuals that impacts or is impacted by that organization, then that, in a sense, is that ecosystem or environment for that particular organization. And I call that its stakeholder world. So every organization then lives inside of some kind of stakeholder world. The larger the organization, the larger the world. So that was the second big insight. Third one really changed my life. Well, how do I get this ecosystem or stakeholder world to really be supportive? And what came to me was this idea of purpose. What if you could have a purpose? If an organization could actually have a purpose. Now, every organization has a purpose, right? I mean, why organize? There's some problem in the world that it's solving. There's some difference it's making. There's some customer that wants its product, which is the same thing. But what if that purpose could be meaningful and important to my entire stakeholder world? Like if everybody in my stakeholder world saw that purpose that my organization was taking on as meaningful and important, what would that mean in terms of the support I would get? And being, an accountant, initially as training, I'd say, wow, this is efficiency, this is leverage. Wow, if I could get all of those resources to work on my behalf, that would be an amazing thing. And then what would organizations look like if they really were just committed to a purpose that was meaningful and important to their stakeholder world? If everybody in their stakeholder world thought of that as meaningful and important, then it must be meaningful and important. And that would be an amazing thing. So it really changed my whole outlook on business. And this is somebody who's been trained, you know, to business school and so forth, you know, that this is really not a subject that comes up, at least not in this way. At least it didn't in the 60s when I was being trained, and then even for many years after that. So I thought, well, I think what I need to do is figure out how this actually works. So being a consultant, working with small, mid-sized companies, that was basically what I did in my career. I started working and going on this journey of figuring out how to get a stakeholder world in support of an organization, its stakeholder world, and how do I create a purpose for that organization that would be meaningful and important to that stakeholder world. And I called that purposeful leadership. Not at the time, I called it purposeful behavior, but subsequent, we changed it to purposeful leadership. And so I want to tell you a little bit about that journey that I started back in 2001 when I took that first course. So for the next 5 years, I worked with my clients in trying to figure out, well, how do I bring this into an organization? First of all, how do I get clients to take on a purpose and think in those terms? And then how do I get it to be meaningful to them and to everybody else that they're dealing with in their little ecosystem, their customers, their supply chain, and so forth. And I continue to work on that. And in 2005, I was in another course. And this course was very interesting because it was about how you would take on some kind of promise in the world that was impossible. And then the course was about, it was a year course. The course was about, like, how do you deliver on an impossible promise? So, which is kind of crazy, but it worked for me. And during that time frame, by the end of the course, I had figured out like what my impossible promise was going to be. And that was by 2025, all businesses would be committed to making a profound difference in the world. And that's it. And that's what I have been working on ever since. Matter of fact, for the next 10 years, I work much more. I focus much more on working with clients to take on purpose and develop the principles and practices organizations could take on so that this would actually occur and that you get the kind of behavior that you're looking for. And then in 2015, I published this book, Thriving in a Stakeholder World. And then the following year, I set up this Foundation for Purposeful Organizations, so that we could bring this idea, this concept into the world business community. And basically, I've been working inside of this promise ever since. And I've only got 5 years left to make it happen. So I'm working hard. So as I said before, every organization seems to have a purpose these days. But the real question is, and I didn't actually have an idea about this when I wrote the book, because you can tell by the name of the title, the subtitle has, strategy. It talks about a competitive advantage, and we're going to talk about how this is not what purpose is all about. So it's true that purpose lives in a lot of organizations, probably most organizations, but does it really live where it makes a difference in that organization? So I think context is everything. So there's this hierarchy of context, but before I get into it, let's get clear what I mean by context. So the definition you can see on the screen is that it's a set of facts and interpretations that surround a situation or event and influence your thinking and action. So it sets up the kind of the boundaries and rules around what you would do. And when you think about it, we operate inside of context all the time. This is what we do. There's some context, and then there are contexts below that support context below that, as you can see in the graphic on the left-hand side of the screen. Let's take an example. Let's look at better health. Let's say you're committed to better health. This is what I want. Well, inside of that, right, there's my healthy body, and then there's my healthy mind. Okay, great. So I got to work on both. But inside of body, okay, then I've got to think about, well, maybe there's exercise, maybe there's diet, and so forth. So you can see that there are these levels of context that channel your thinking in a way that get you results. And without this hierarchy of context, you would be lost. So context is everything. So how does that work in business? So I think of business as consisting of 5 things. Businesses need 5 things. They need profit, they need planning, purpose, people, and performance. I picked those words because they all begin with P. I can remember them. Makes it easy. So let's talk about profit. So it's not just profit, it's survival. If you're a nonprofit, are you concerned about profit? No, but you are concerned about survival. And then planning. Once you've decided what you're committed to, you've got to find out what you're going to do. Like, what are you going to do? What products are you going to make? What services are you going to provide? What value are you going to bring to the world? Okay, inside of your overriding purpose, context, which in this case is profit or survival. And then once you've decided on what that business model looks like, then you're going to have to use people to actually implement, and then they're going to take action and perform for you. So then where does purpose live in this organization? Well, it's my experience that in most organizations, purpose lives inside of planning, inside of your business model, or actually inside of the people or performance. You could have a purpose around your culture. You could have a purpose around the product and service you make. Purpose lives inside of some other overriding context. That's okay. Most businesses are like this, except for maybe startups and businesses that start, because when businesses get started, there's generally this problem that they're addressing. If you look at all successful companies today, look at Google, if you look at Facebook, any of these companies, they all had some problem that they were trying to address early on. And everybody that was part of that initial group were committed to that. And it's clear to me that was really what drove everybody initially. And that's when purpose lives higher up in the chain. But as businesses grow and develop, other things come forward and take on more meaning to people. And very soon, purpose ends up further down the hierarchy, as you can see in this diagram. Let's look at an example. There's this company, CVS Health. That's what it's called now. It wasn't called that back in the 60s. So this is an East Coast company that was formed in the 60s, primarily in beauty supplies, and they had a lot of stores. CVS stood for Consumer Value Store. Early on, they started acquiring some pharmacies and started growing. And their strategy for growth was acquisition. So they just acquired a lot of other pharmacies and drugstores around the country, drugstore chains. And that was primarily in the 70s. And by the 2000s, they had gone national. They'd finally gotten out to California. And that's when I found out about them. There was one near our house. They offer 40% discounts. And when you can offer 40% discounts, I'm in there. So that's my experience with CVS. There's nothing anything I buy there, it's got a 40% discount. I don't know if that's any cheaper, but that's what I got. So also in the early 2000s, the leadership decided to rethink why they were in business. And they decided that why they were in business was to help people on their path to better health. That's their purpose. Matter of fact, if you go into any of their stores, you'll see that on the wall. They changed their name to CVS Health, and they decided to reinvent pharmacy. What that means. Sounds good, this is what businesses do. They come up with a purpose. They're in that business already. They say, hey, let's make that our purpose. Okay, where does it live? Well, let's find out. So in 2014, they did something extraordinary. And what they did is they got rid of their tobacco products in their stores, in their drugstores. And that was $1 billion business for them at the time. $1 billion. And it was a very profitable business for them. And this is a public company, so their stock tanked after that happened, initially. But soon, the investment community realized that this was a very wise decision, an economic decision. Because what they had gotten into was the drug management business, big time. And you can't sell tobacco products on the one hand, and then have your customer, have you handle their drug programs. It's sort of like a conflict of interest, right? You can't have both. So I'm sure they did a lot of analysis. They figured it all out. They figured what the value would be down the road. They could see maybe that tobacco was dying out, or that market wasn't growing, but they could see the drug management business was going to be big for them. So they made that decision. They made that strategic decision. Now, was it based on purpose, or was it based on economics? I think it was based on economics. Why do I say that? Well, if you go into one of their stores today, you can see that they don't have tobacco products, but they do have alcohol, and they have a lot of candy. I don't know what else they got there, that may not be healthy, but I noticed that right off the bat. So obviously, I'm not sure that purpose is at the top. Let's put it that way. I'm not sure that's the overriding context for their business. I believe it's something like this. I believe purpose lives inside of their business model, which is probably not uncommon. Now, is that bad? This company is very successful, right? Stocks up, you keep acquiring more businesses and so forth. Well, yes and no. Yes, it's successful in the short term, but I don't know about the long term. I mean, we don't know about that. Let's take a look at a human being and compare that to an organization. So a human being consists of lots of different pieces, right? There are organs, there's a microbiome, there's you can see it, there's this whole blood vessels, there's muscles, there's all kinds of things, nerves. It's huge. There's so many things inside, so complex. There's so many things going on. But we know that when some of that doesn't work, it affects the entire body. So it's very important that every part of our body, all this complexity, operates at some level of efficiency. Organizations are no different. They're complex too. They have lots of different departments, business units, teams, you name it. They have relationships. They have cross-functional teams. They have all kinds of different arrangements of people organized in a way to provide some value. And each one of these different groups is led by somebody. So there are all these business leaders out there inside the organization. So maybe at the macro level, if you're the CEO and you're putting these mergers together with your team, that's fine. But that's the macro level. But what about the micro level? What about inside all these enterprises? There are all these other groups of people, because that's what gets things done. It's people, and they're led by people. And what leaders think, and what these leaders think about at night, are all the issues that they have, that they're concerned about, such as finding and keeping the right people, maintaining employee energy and initiative, building brand power or value for their customer, whoever that customer is, could be inside the company, keeping employees from working at cross purposes with each other. How do you keep these thousands of people straight in what they're supposed to be doing so that it all works? Managing the right level of supervision. How do you empower people, but not too much so that they end up doing things that maybe it's not in the best interest? Maintaining that competitive edge, meeting corporate goals, instilling creativity and innovation, and many more. There are many things that leaders worry about. I believe that there are three, and I call them superpowers. There are three superpowers that really addresses most of these things for leaders. And if they had these superpowers, they could address and solve most of these problems. Let's see what that looks like. I think those superpowers are inspiration, clarity and focus, and engagement. And you get these when an organization has a purpose that's meaningful and important to its stakeholders. And it's the overriding context. That's the key. Purpose living anywhere else but at the top does not have these superpowers. Maybe a little of them, but you don't get the real benefit unless it's the overriding context. And I discovered that. I didn't realize that. Not till later. Because people know. People aren't stupid. They know. Everybody knows when, what that business is committed to. I mean, they look at what they're measured, what the company's measured, and what they're measured by. They look at that and they say, okay, I don't see purpose anywhere here. I see something else. And as a result, you don't get the benefit of these superpowers in an organization. So let's look at each one in a little more detail. Inspiration. So you can get people to do things a couple of different ways. You can bribe them, which is most common, right? Pay them a lot of money, offer them better jobs and so forth. You can bribe them, you can coerce them, or you can inspire them. Inspiring people is a lot more effective. It's also the only way you get the maximum out of people. You just don't get it. You get the minimum out of people if you're trying to, threaten them into doing something or bribing them into doing something. When you have a purpose that's meaningful and important, it's something that is shared and it's of great value. And as a result, people work harder around that because people want to belong. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. People want to be fulfilled. And if they can see how what they do is having an impact on what the difference the organization is making, then they have a sense of fulfillment. And we know that people are much more productive when they're fulfilled. Clarity, focus. When purpose is your overriding context for everything, you know exactly what to do. You don't have to worry about doing all of the analysis. You know the directions you have to take. You can stay aligned, it's easy. You can also give people a lot more freedom. You can empower people. You can allow people to operate independently because they see where they're going. It also gives you the boundaries and opportunity to kind of be creative and innovative. And of course, if you have a purpose that's meaningful and important, and it's the overriding purpose, people will just, what important means, okay, let's get clear on that. What important means is that you take action. It's one thing to have to be, inspired, but if you don't take action, what does it mean? So it's got to be important to you, not just be meaningful, but important. And when you get that, people get engaged. And when they're engaged, they're more attentive. They care more. They perform better. And even your supply chain will support you more if they're engaged. Your customers will support you even when you make mistakes. They'll support you if they're engaged, if they believe in what you're up to. So superpower is the secret. So how do you get superpowers? You get them when you put purpose at the top. So in purposeful leadership, purpose is that overriding context for everything you do. And that's what distinguishes purposeful leadership from anything else. And you can see what it means. When you have an overriding purpose and you embrace that purpose, then you can decide, how am I going to express that in the world? What business model am I going to take on? What products and services am I going to offer? And then what people am I going to need? And groups of people that I have to engage in this, have them engaged at a level that I can produce the results. and then make sure that every action I take, all that I perform, aligning with purpose. And then making sure that I'm a healthy organization, and that how I get healthy and stay healthy is in pursuit of purpose. So what is purposeful leadership, in short? It's a context. It's not a style of leadership. There are many styles of leadership out there. This is not a style of leadership. It's a context in which you can have many different styles of leadership. It's a different worldview. You see the world differently, and you have to act differently. And it's based on some very simple concepts. One, purpose is the reason an organization exists. And if it's the reason, it needs to be the overriding context for everything you do. An organization's success and survival is a function of its relationship with the people in its stakeholder world. This is critical. And we're talking about the world, but we're also talking about a smaller subgroup of that, your key stakeholders, the ones that are really critical for you, like your customers, your suppliers, your employees, number one, right? And other key stakeholders that are going to be very critical for your success. Okay? So it's not just it's just not you, and it's just not your team. There's a whole ecosystem out there that is going to be pulling for you and going to be critical for your success. And the way you put it all together is to have a purpose that is meaningful and important to all of those people. Because only then can you unleash the power and resources of that stakeholder world. Those three superpowers we talked about. So what about our methodology, which is what we spent 15 years developing? It really involves four areas, covered pretty much the way you saw those diagrams. First, we support organizations in discovering what their purpose is. The methodology is critical. That's a critical part, and it's called Purpose Embrace. And then the second area is strategy, like what is the business model? So we help organizations design a business model that delivers on purpose. And then you need people to implement that. So who are those key stakeholders? We call that your stakeholder community. And how to, first identifying who those are, designing your own stakeholder community. You get to choose. You know, that's the benefit of us. We get to choose our ecosystem and the key stakeholders that are going to be critical for our success. And then we work at engaging them in what we're up to through our purpose. And then we build a culture and around that and take actions that will fulfill on that purpose, that are aligned with purpose. So inside of that, we have a variety of principles and practices that we bring to organizations and support them in mastering this particular approach, which we call a context for leadership, purposeful leadership. So for our foundation, what our purpose is, unleashing organizational potential with purpose. And we do that with a platform that supports a consulting body, which are our partners, in helping organizations lead from purpose. And on the platform, we have a variety of resources. We offer webinars, and we have courses and a lot of technical information and practices that they can take on. We also try to build a community of leaders that believe in leading from purpose, so that they can interact with each other and learn best practices from each other. So we can build this body of knowledge around purposeful leadership. And all that is done, and we have interactive tools, by the way, on the site to support the leadership. The different, our different partners, our consulting partners. And that's what we do as an organization. So that's the message I wanted to bring you to leave you with today. Hopefully you'll figure out where you work, where purpose lives inside your organization, and wherever it is, hopefully you can start moving it up the ladder to get it to the top and have it be your overriding context for leadership. Thank you. Any questions?
Thanks, Paul, for that wonderful and very informative session. We do have some questions that came in, so I encourage more people to send them in now and use the Q&A box. But we can start with this one. How can someone not in a position of leadership introduce this concept into their organization?
Well, when you say leadership, I think we're all leaders in a sense, or we could all become leaders. So we could take that on as who we are as leaders. And so there, depending upon, you know, how many people you interact with, I think this is something that can live inside of large enterprises at the department and business unit level. It would be very hard for a large enterprise to take this on at the top without have worked through some of those issues lower in the organization. This is a huge shift, and it's also an issue around what kind of, whether you're a public corporation or not, because shareholders, you know, have a big say in today's world because of the laws around corporations and the rights of shareholders. So this is something that has to be worked out. But I think it's something that can be achieved at lower levels within an organization, and eventually over time, I think organizations can see the benefit and then start to bring it up the chain. Maybe start at a department level, then grow to a business unit and subsidiary, and maybe other business units within the organization, and so forth. But it is a challenge. It is a challenge because there's always that, you know, there's that legacy culture that does not support this. That's really designed around a profit oriented organization, you know, performance. So I would say that find out more about it, join the foundation, and begin to introduce it to people within the organization and see how that works out. And of course, then you can always contact our consulting partners to help bring that into an organization through facilitation work or coaching, whichever is available that makes sense for your particular organization or business unit.
Thank you. Another question came in. What are the barriers that get in the way of leaders using inspiration with employees versus other methods of improving performance?
Well, one of the problems is your compensation plan. If you want to inspire people and have them operate through inspiration, one, you have to make sure that they're incentivized however you want them to be inspired. So if an organization has a purpose that they find meaningful and important, or anything that they find meaningful and important, you want to make sure that your compensation program is around that and supports that. If it is in conflict with that, then it's going to be very difficult for people. Remember, people operate in this hierarchy. We all do. We all have these different boundaries, and we're always looking for that overriding context. So whatever that is, that's going to drive our behavior. So if you want that, you need to have everything aligned with that along the way. And what are the measures? How are you being evaluated? All of that has to be aligned. And if it's not, you're not going to get the results, because people see through that. They know what's important. And if what's important is not meaningful and important to them, then you're not going to get an inspired workforce.
Thanks. We just had another question come in and through the chat. It says, is Mr. Retoff familiar with, I think it's Agile Scrum? Once a company has a purpose defined, I found that Agile Scrum framework is the best way to organize a company at all levels based on agilemanifesto.org, and then explained in, I guess, resources that are on this website. Inspiration is related to self-deterministic theory, which was defined, well, this is very specific, which was defined by DC and Ryan at U of R and popularized by Daniel Pink in his book Drive. So
I'm not familiar with that. I'd love to find out about it. Maybe that person can send me an email and give me some more contact information around that, and I'd be happy to check that out.
That would be wonderful.
Especially if it's being pursued at the University of Rochester, then there may be something we could talk about.
Great. We'll make sure that happens.
Right.
The next question is, do organizations know their destination at the start or just their path?
I'm trying to understand that question, but it sounds like, do organizations know where they're going at the start? I think they know I think they know what they're trying to accomplish. And I would suspect they have some kind of vision of what that might look like in the future, because I think without the vision, it's hard to know what to do. So you have this commitment that you have this problem you're solving, but you want to you probably are envisioning what that might look like when you actually solve the problem. Because I think that is what inspires people. So it would seem to me that most organizations, if they have a purpose that's meaningful and important in their early stage of development, have visualized, what that might look like when it's actually working for them, because that's what's driving them. That's what's really the important thing. Not the purpose itself, but what it eventually will accomplish.
Another question, how do you identify candidates that are aligned with your purpose?
Well, I think it's very important in the recruiting process that when you talk to people, that you tell them what your organization's purpose is. And ask them, you could ask them, is this meaningful and important to you? Or ask them how they see themselves operating inside of that and in fulfilling that purpose within our organization. Have them kind of really think through their role, because you want them to connect the dots. You don't want somebody in your organization does not see how their effort will get you to fulfill on that purpose. You want it all aligned. And if somebody's not excited about that, if they're into something else, it's better to find that out at the beginning. So this is very important to raise in your early interviews with people. That's why purpose is so important. Get it clear right up front that this is what we're committed to as an organization. This is something you want to spend your life with.
Thank you. How is this different than triple bottom line? People, planet, profit.
Well, I think those are nice things to have, but they don't really provide any real clarity in terms of what to do and how to make a difference. I think these are good things to have as criteria or setting some kind of, overall boundaries. If you're going to be a purposeful organization, you're going to make a difference in some way, and that's going to have an impact. You want to make sure that's a positive impact. So you can't solve one problem and create another problem at the same time. So having a concern for planet is important, but that's something you would consider. It's not something that is fundamental. It's not something, because it doesn't provide any specific direction and clarity or focus. But it's something that you need to address in terms of making sure that whatever value you're providing in the world, whatever difference you're making, is really a difference that's positive. Because negative differences are not inspiring for people, I don't think. And therefore, positive differences are. And every solution to a problem has a cost. And it's understanding what that cost is at the time. You may not know it at the time. My guess is that most companies, even the tobacco industry, they had a purpose. They probably had no idea the damage it did to the body when that was first developed. That came later with knowledge, and it's true with everything. Fertilizer is another perfect example. Probably the greatest thing that ever happened initially until people realized the damage it does. You can look at a lot of industries, legacy industries out there, where when their purposes originally developed, they were important and they made tremendous improvements in the world. But then we learned and we found out other new things, but they became so in love with their business model that they forgot their overriding purpose, which is what happens as organizations mature. So those are important issues to consider, but they don't give you the direction that you really need.
We just had someone comment, I find that when organizations are struggling, and many are right now, people abandon their higher purposes and just focus on survival. Do you have comments about that?
Yes, I think that's a big issue. And I think it's a big mistake, because only with purpose can you really start to create new opportunities and enroll and other people in your cause. We found in working with companies that during this pandemic, for example, start to kind of reinvent their business models, given the fact that they're still committed to what they were committed to originally. Their purpose is still intact, but now they have to kind of change their business model. Now, most businesses will have to do this anyway. It's just that now everybody's doing it at the same time. Business models aren't forever. They change. People's tastes change. A particular kind of approach changes. If you fall in love with your business model and that becomes the overriding context, then you're in trouble, because then you don't react when things happen, when your environment changes. So I think having an overriding purpose is critical for organizations to keep in line, for you to create new opportunities and create new business models that can work in these new circumstances.
How can a purpose-oriented organization not be met with cynicism externally by the general public? And the example they give is vaccine development during a pandemic versus perception of greed.
Well, that comes back to the old question, is like, what do you do and what do you measure? So a company that promotes its purpose, but everybody knows it's committed to something else, doesn't work. And that's where you get that cynicism, because people know that what they're committed to is profits. Yeah, they're dealing with these other issues, but that's fine. But it's inside of profits, so it's different. So don't expect to get the kind of support you would get if people really saw that you were committed to making a difference. And there are companies out there that, not a lot of them, but there are companies out there that it's clear what they're committed to. And there's no cynicism around their actions, because they can see right through that they're committed to that overriding purpose, and everything they do is aligned with that. And that's what you need. So PR departments is not where you got to be putting your money. You got to be putting it in figuring out how you bring purpose back up to be that overriding context in your organization. Because it just won't work. It's just wasting money.
What percentage of businesses today have purpose at the top and center of their organization?
Well, I think most startups do. I would say maybe 70, 80% of startups, these are just off the top of my head, I have no statistics on this, but I would say probably maybe 10% of more mature businesses have purpose at the top, from my experience. And remember, I focus primarily in the middle market in the greater Los Angeles area. That's been my market for the past 40 years. And from what I've seen, I would say a very, very small percentage, and I would say smaller than 10%, have purpose as the overriding context for what they do.
How might purposeful leadership work in larger organizations that seem to have multiple missions?
Well, that is an issue. You can't, I don't think organizations work effectively if they have multiple missions. I think there has to be one mission. When I say mission, I use purpose and mission interchangeably. Now, some people have different definitions for mission around, what they do and so forth, which is fine. But I'm assuming what you mean in this case is organizations that seem to have multiple purposes. And it's hard. I don't see how that works. I think our bodies are designed around a hierarchy, and it's not it can't be either or. There's got to be something at the top. There's got to be a hierarchy. You can't have people and profit. You can't make a difference and profit. You've got to decide. You've got to choose. You've got to choose. Otherwise, it's confusing. And you can't get people inspired about that. People have to know what they're committed to. It's not one or the other. It's got to be one thing. Now, take a company like Alphabet. So Google originally had all these different departments that were working on different projects, right? Because they have this thing where any employee can, or certain employees can spend a certain amount of their time developing new ideas. Okay, that's exciting, but that presents each one of those ideas is a new problem solving that they're solving, and may or may not be aligned with the purpose of the organization. And they realize that. And so what they did is they set up this, overreaching enterprise called Alphabet, so that each of these different entities can have their own purpose. And there may be a purpose that is more general in nature, but applies to all of those different enterprises. So you can have hierarchies of purpose inside of purpose. But within each operating entity, there needs to be a single purpose. No different than if you had a company, right? Where the company has some purpose that at least that's your belief, and you're a business unit inside of that. So you want to be aligned with that, but then you could then have a purpose that is more specific inside of that. But your context also lives inside of the greater purpose. But there always has to be this hierarchy.
And sorry, I don't think you said it, but can profit be a purpose?
Yes, it can. Profit can be a purpose. But think about how you define purpose, okay? Purpose has to be meaningful and important to your stakeholder world. So you find a world in which everybody finds profit meaningful and important, and you operate in that world. You can have profit as a purpose. It's just very difficult to find that. There may be a few out there. I don't know of any offhand, but there may be organizations that operate inside a world in which purpose is the purpose of profit is meaningful and important to everyone, and are inspired by it.
One of our attendees is saying profit as purpose is in hedge fund industry. So I think it meaning that hedge fund industry has profit as its purpose.
Yes, and if you looked at their stakeholder, you'd have to look at their stakeholder community, not their community, their world. Look at who they impact. Just figure out who they impact. They may have it as their purpose. Most organizations have it as their purpose. They don't say it, but they have it as their purpose. That's their overriding context. In my world, your overriding context, whatever that is your purpose. Because you're doing everything else to achieve that. So that is why you're in business, and you want to maximize that. whatever's at the top, you want to maximize that. So if profit's at the top, you want to maximize profit. If changing the world in some way is at the top, which most businesses do, then you want to maximize that. Whatever's at the top, you want to maximize. So yes, if a hedge fund company believes that purpose is a meaningful, if profit is a meaningful purpose, then great. But my guess is that if they look at their stakeholder world, they're going to find a lot of stakeholders that may not be in agreement with that. Especially if they go around and buy companies up as part of their strategy. I'm not sure those companies find that meaningful and important to them.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and just something you just said made me think, you know, how do you see this approach saving the planet? Just in a couple of minutes. So that, is this something that can save the world?
I think it can save capitalism.
Yeah.
I think it can save. I think it can save business. I think it can save the world in the sense that we are focusing on problems that we're solving. If all organizations just focused on the problems that they're solving and made sure that they solve those problems meaningful and that they created value, positive value from those solutions, and they stay focused on that, the world would be a better place. There's no question about that. If you look at all the problems we have in organizations today, it's because these organizations are not following their original purpose. They are giving up on their purpose, and they're focusing on either survival, meaning how do I keep my business model alive? Just look at all of the mature industries out there that we're fighting, that are affecting our environment. They're all struggling to stay in, to keep their business models alive. They're in the survival mode. That's their purpose. If we could transform that and have all these organizations start rethinking why they're in business, now we could save the world. I believe that. That's why I've been working inside of this promise for the past 10 years.
Well, we really appreciate your presentation today. We have the information, www.leadfrompurpose.org. And are there any other ways that can we share out your email, and some people would like to follow up, I believe. And I will be sending the slides and the video taping of this webinar out in the next couple of days for everyone as well.
Happy to talk to anybody, people that are, especially we're looking for more consulting partners that can bring this particular methodology into the world business community. And so we're anxious to talk to people that would like to help that. We are a nonprofit, by the way, and we're here to support the world business community.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the time that you took to speak with everyone today, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this.
All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.